congratulations on an amazing film. I'm so happy to be able to talk to you about it, and I have so many questions.
Thank you.
But it's really terrific. So great job.
Thank you. And thanks
Um,
for doing this.
yeah, of course, my pleasure. So, how did you first come across Lake Trinity and decide to make this film?
Yeah, so I actually initially I knew I wanted to make a film about a trailer park in crisis. I didn't know about this trailer park, but I had read about parks across the country closing or becoming unaffordable. And I had also read that 6% of Americans live in mobile homes. It's the largest source of affordable housing. So the disappearance of this kind of housing struck me as a huge issue. And I love films that explore little worlds like a park. So I started looking for a community that I could embed in and profile. And I had reached out to a activist in Florida who helps communities like this connect with resources that they need to advocate for themselves. And she and I made a plan to drive across the state and visit like 8 parks or something. But this was the second park that we visited, and I immediately canceled the rest of the trip because I didn't really know anything about this park. It hadn't been reported on. But when you drive in, you are immediately struck by the fact that this park sits underneath this enormous broadcasting tower that is beaming TBN's programming into the country. And you learn quickly that this trailer park is owned by Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN. It's the largest evangelical TV station in the world. And what a strange and unusual thing. And TBN was selling the property and closing the park. So I was curious and compelled and stayed right there.
Yeah, so which was fascinating because it was kind of clear that you had initially gone in to document a mobile home park and instead found these amazing characters, Nancy Sanderson, Nancy Fleischman, and Lori Laney. And this story that you've just touched on, their struggles as they were being displaced by this religious broadcaster that kind of presents itself as a moral authority.
Yeah.
Can you talk about when that storyline really became the center of the film for you?
Yeah, totally. So I met those 3 women fairly quickly. The first night that I was in the park, I entered the park and I learned that, oh, the community's gathering tonight. We're meeting tonight to figure out what we're going to do because it was fairly soon after the eviction notice had come out. So I joined the community. I introduced myself and said, I'd like to spend the weekend here and get to know you. And this very sweet woman tapped me on the shoulder and said, oh, you can come sit on my porch. Come hang out with me. And that was Nancy Sanderson, who became kind of the heart of the film. So I met her very quickly, and then immediately, I'm sitting on her porch the next day, and this fabulous woman with long white hair, wearing hot pink, whizzes by on a tricycle, and that's Nancy Fleischman, another main character in the film. And of course, it's like, who's that? She's just so larger than life. And she had lived in the park for almost 40 years and had worked on and off for this broadcasting station for decades and credited the TBN with saving her soul. She loved it. She really felt like TBN was going to step in and save them. So this feeling that, oh no, TBN will do the right thing, and ultimate like bewilderment when they did choose profits over people was so fascinating to me because it allowed me to approach this story less through a lens of, well, what is legal? What does the contract say that TBN owes these people? And more through a lens of, well, what's the right thing to do? Because that is how these women were thinking about the issue.
Right. Yeah, so I remember Nancy Fleischman said of the Trinity Broadcasting Network something to the effect of they said they were going to help us relocate and they haven't. They
Yeah.
really haven't done anything. So, what do you feel like your film is ultimately saying about the Trinity Broadcasting Network's responsibility for the harms that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's a very simple message that um, we owe each other more than what a piece of paper, a contract, a land lease might say that we owe each other. And I do think they had some moral responsibility to help relocate these people, and they failed in that responsibility. It's also a much larger story. The problem wasn't just that these women were being evicted, it's that they had nowhere to go, that there was nowhere affordable for them in Florida, across the country. This is something that millions of Americans are facing, older Americans, aging Americans. So it's also kind of a sounding the alarm, I would say, the film is doing. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
it's
appreciate that.
Yeah, but it was kind of through three people's personal experiences. The phrase housing crisis never came up. The affordability crisis, we weren't speaking about that, but of course that is what's happening in the background.
Can you talk about the three different women in a little bit greater depth and kind of how their different journeys helps tell this story in a deeper and more insightful way? I mean, it seems like the park means different things for each of the women. It seems to be more about independence for Lori,
Totally.
and care and community for Nancy Sanderson, and for Nancy Fleischman. It's really this very painful rupture with an institution that she had once trusted. How did following each of their stories provide insight into the larger narrative that you were getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I think you actually put it pretty well, very well. Nancy Sanderson's story was she's she really in many ways is sort of the victim of what's happening. She didn't see herself that way, but she was more at risk than anyone else. She was really, really vulnerable. And I legitimately was very concerned that she would be unhoused at the end of this process. So I think through Nancy Sanderson, we see just how dire the situation was and what it means to not be able to afford housing, especially if you're on fixed income like she was. Nancy Fleischman, it's every time I spoke to Nancy Fleischman, I felt like we were, really talking about like big moral issues, and that was something that was just fascinating to explore. And um, we actually explored in much greater depth than is in the final film. But I'm always happy to hear that it's like is still coming out and people are hearing that. That's really what we're talking about. And then Lori, yeah, for Lori, it was independence. Lori is like larger than life person. I have so much admiration for her. And she even though she never had children or married, she is like a mother. She mothered everybody in the park. She really, really took care of people. And the reason she was the last person to leave the park on New Year's Eve is because she made sure that everybody had a place to go, just constantly like lugging things, heavy, huge, heavy objects across the park, cleaning up so that people aren't stepping on broken glass as the park is being destroyed. So, yes, Lori says that the park helped her preserve her independence because she could affordably live on her own. And she is an incredibly independent woman. But for Lori, actually, the park was community. And for all of them, it was community. All of them, even though they're each very different, were extremely vulnerable because they were on their own and on fixed income. So they were losing something really, really important and meaningful when the park closed.
Well, I love how you tell the film through their eyes because, as a viewer, you really kind of are taken on this journey with them. And it doesn't feel like it's kind of these hard-hitting issues, but you experience them just in being on the journey of the film. So to that and I'm curious as to, after having spent time with these women and making this film, do you see Lake Trinity as a local tragedy or as something bigger, a warning about how the national affordability and housing crisis is failing, particularly older adults on fixed income? who, as we now know, are the fastest growing unhoused age group in the country.
Yeah, no, of course it's the latter. It's not a local story. It's more than half of our country is in the same boat. And when the film was posted on YouTube by The New Yorker, in the comments, you had people saying, like, this happened to my neighbor, this is happening to my mother. I see myself reflected in these people. And so I wish it weren't true, but many, many people are in the same boat. And like you said, we have an aging population, and it is that older population that is becoming unhoused or housing insecure faster than any other group, which is like it's a huge crisis that is waiting to explode if it hasn't already. Um, so definitely it's the latter.
Okay. You end the film without offering a real resolution, and instead we kind of watch options narrow and routines disappear and uncertainty set in. Can you talk about that choice to not have a definitive conclusion with this film?
Yeah, I think, you know, throughout the film, we're kind of saying goodbye to this park that is disappearing. And when it's gone, it's gone. And so even though we did actually film a bit after the park had closed with each woman in their new environment, it felt more poignant to end with the film and kind of like feel that loss and feel how life kind of stopped right there. Um, and I love the final shot, I'll say, which is Lori's like kind of dancing even as her home is being hauled away. And I felt like that was her kind of trying to say, look, I'm still kicking. I can't be beaten down. Um, Her resilience in the face of terrible circumstances really spoke to me. So I wanted to end it right there. Of course, time didn't stop and life did go on. And I visited with everybody, and people are doing okay, I would say. Lori and Nancy Fleischman are doing okay. Nancy Sanderson is, which is the one who was losing her memory, um, has had a hard few years. She's declining, and I think the she's in a assisted living facility, and um, the lack of community there is hard. She's really lonely, which is terribly sad, but it's the truth. Um, but what really enrages me is that the property, the piece of land that Trinity was so intent on emptying out in a hurry, has sat empty for 3 years now. And they
Gosh.
recently put it up for sale. But for the two of the women who stayed in the area to drive past this like fenced off wasteland that's just been torn apart, but for like to what end was a real slap in the face.
Gosh. Well, the lack of humanity is just really upsetting, but I so appreciate you bringing attention to this issue and doing it in such a beautiful way. Is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't cover?
I want to read to you what TBN said when I reached out to them for comment. Somebody was asking me about this today, and so I looked it up and I was reminded just of the coldness of it, but I'll let you decide for yourself. I asked, would you care to comment on how TBN's real estate decisions ended up impacting the residents of Lakeside Park Estates? And the response was, TBN is unaware at this time of any lasting impact, whether positive or negative, regarding any of the former residents of the trailer park. And they used scare quotes for impact and residents, which, is just cold and mean and dehumanizing, um, in my opinion. And I'll leave it at that.
Have they seen the film?
The women or
No,
TBN.
too yet.
I don't know. It's out there and they know about it because I emailed them about it. So I have to imagine that they have seen it. But I haven't heard from them since it was posted.
Right. Wow. Well, listen, you did a fantastic job. It's a wonderful film. I really encourage folks to see it, and it it touches on such a hugely important issue that is going to increasingly impact our country and so many of the people living in it and our family members and community. So I think it's really so relevant and important. And I appreciate your work. You did a beautiful job and bringing our collective attention to this issue. It's really amazing.